Here we go. So I did a video series last summer on the history of hockey, where I went season by season through, and it it started out slowly, shall we say. Basically, the first few videos got a lot of views, and then it kind of tailed off when you get to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s. But there's some fun stuff that happened each year in hockey. So what I've done is I've got all of the hockey news annuals from 1980 right through until now. So I've gone through and I've found just some little tidbits and stuff. And some of this, is easy enough to find online. Some of it is kind of like just trivia stuff. So we're going with the 79-80 season to start with. I was not watching hockey regularly at this point. I was very young, 6 years of age and whatnot. So not a rabid hockey watcher as I would become a couple of years later. And there are some interesting things that were going on. Now, of course, this was the year that the New York Islanders win their first Stanley Cup. And this was the year that Gretzky played his first year. So we don't look back at this year as anything more than just Gretzky's first year. But he had tonsillitis, and it was bad. And he saw 4 different doctors. Did eventually get his tonsils out, but he had to go to 4 different doctors while playing the games. He did miss one game due to it. So he misses out on the scoring title. He's tied with Marcel Dion. Dion had more goals, so Dion wins the Art Ross. Gretzky loses out because of his tonsils. Yep. And you have to wonder, in a year where he scored 137 points, man, if he wasn't in pain, how many more points would he have scored that year? He signed a 2-year contract with Nielsen Chocolate, and the contract's written on a 10-pound chocolate slab. Yeah, so you're probably not going to hear that a lot when you hear about Gretzky's greatest moments. So there you go. They actually wrote it out in icing sugar on top of a chocolate slab. 10 pounds. Does Wayne still have that? That's the question I have, because, yeah, that's his first, well, one of his first contracts when it came to the whole marketing and sponsorship things. Um, and then for the Oilers on the ice, Ron Lowe gets brought in and provides some clutch goaltending and helps get them to the playoffs. So before Grant Fuhr, before Andy Moog, Ron Lowe comes in and has a pretty solid run. This is a controversial time, though. In order to appease the incoming WHA teams who want to see everybody equally, they go with a balanced schedule. Every team plays each other 20 times, so it equals 80 games. So with a balanced schedule for the WHA editions, the playoffs are 1 versus 16. The balanced travel schedule means it's brutal for the teams that are in the unbalanced West, looking at the LA Kings and the Vancouver Canucks. And in the 80s, when the Canucks are struggling and they can't get over 500, it is attributed as being one of the reasons, is brutal travel schedule, and this leads to more injuries, guys not being well rested. And there is something to be said for that, because back in the 80s, it's just Vancouver and LA. There's no San Jose, there's no Anaheim, no Arizona, no Vegas. Closest you get is Edmonton and Calgary. And for people who may not know this, Edmonton and Calgary are not really close to Vancouver. So that balanced schedule works well for the WHA teams, but other NHL teams hate it. And this is the example I give when people say, well, we should have a schedule with playoffs that goes back to this. It only works with a balanced schedule, and teams hate balanced schedules. The New York Islanders add Butch Goring, and what that does, because we always hear about Butch Goring going to the Islanders as being the start of trade deadline being important. The LA Kings give up Butch Goring. The Islanders then go on this huge streak down the stretch. And in the playoffs, they're fantastic. They win themselves the Stanley Cup. Butch Goring takes the pressure off Brian Trottier. Trottier had to do it all. As soon as Goring shows up, that takes the pressure off. And that's your first Stanley Cup win for the Islanders. Now, sandwiched in between all of these things, Don Cherry coached the Rockies that year and hated Hardy Astrom. On his way out the door, he said the goaltending's the problem in Colorado. And attendance was a problem for the Colorado Rockies as well. So that was the year that Don Cherry coached his last season in the National Hockey League. The Philadelphia Flyers, 35-game undefeated streak. And in and amongst that as well, the fact that they had 1,842 penalty minutes to lead the NHL, which might be more penalty minutes than the entire league had this past 2018-2019 season. Amazing run by Philly. And yet, in the Stanley Cup Finals, they lose to the New York Islanders, and there's some bitterness about how that takes place, right? So when people talk about controversial goals now, there were controversial goals back in 1980 as well. Steve Vickers leads the league with a shooting percentage of 29.6. So you want your trivia, there you go. And Jimmy Mann leads the league with 287 penalty minutes. When he was drafted in the first round, I don't know that Winnipeg envisioned Jimmy Mann being just a tough guy. I think they envisioned a little more offense than what they got from him, and he would not be a Winnipeg Jet for very long. The Boston Bruins, well, they're getting old. The Bruins are getting old, and it's starting to affect their ability to get further in the playoffs. You got Jean Rattel, who's 40, Dan Marcotte, Brad Park, Wayne Cashman, Gary Doak, all in their early to mid-30s, and it's leading to Boston having some trouble keeping up with the kids in the game. The Sabres, they do well in Scotty Bowman's first year, and Scotty Bowman admits these guys did better than I thought they would. That's a real... Is that... If you're a player on that team, are you like, wait a minute, coach, you didn't believe in us? Or are you like, yeah, that's right, we overachieved? I don't know, but Lindy Ruff has moved from defense to the wing. Lindy Ruff did not always play on the wing. And this is something that I don't think we see as much in hockey now as we did back then, where wingers and defenders, you could switch them back and forth. And I sometimes think that the NHL misses out on that. There are players that I'll say, he'd be better off as a winger. And it's not an insult to the player as a defenseman. It's just sometimes players are better off playing forward. And Lindy Ruff was definitely one of them. He became an excellent defensive forward in the NHL. In Detroit, Nedomansky, he just went into the Hall of Fame, and he's the leading goal scorer for the Detroit Red Wings with 36. They have high hopes when they pick Mike Blaisdell and Mark Osborne in the 1980 draft. And if you're like, who's Mike Blaisdell? Yeah. Osborne went on to a pretty good career. Blaisdell, not as long, not as great. Detroit is mediocre at this point, and it's a disaster. And it's not going to get better anytime soon for Detroit. Now with St. Louis, Mike Liut helps the St. Louis Blues, who've been last overall the year before. They move up 32 points. And Liut leads the league in time, minutes played, and in wins. He is absolutely stands on his head. One of the best years that a goaltender's ever had was Mike Liut that year for the Blues. Gordie Howe retired. That was his last year, 79-80. And that leaves Mark, who played left wing and defense for the Whalers. So there's another one. Solid defenseman. He's in the Hall of Fame. Great defenseman. He also played on the wing. He did that for the Whalers. I believe he played on the wing at certain points for the Flyers as well. He could do both. Atlanta, their struggles finally end. They end up being moved to the Calgary Flames during the summer of 1980 and moving into the Corral. So the Corral, they know, needs to be replaced, and it'll get replaced by the Saddledome soon enough. So for the Flames, that is the first time that a team will get moved out of Atlanta. It won't be the last. Montreal is still seen as contenders. They'd been looking for their fifth straight Stanley Cup in 1980. They're still seen though as contenders with guys like Guy Lafleur and Steve Shutt and Larry Robinson and a lot of Hall of Famers there. So there's still a lot in the tank, it would appear, for Montreal in 1980. And what isn't known is they won't win the Cup again until 1986. And that's going to be with a kid in the net that nobody's paying attention to yet because he wouldn't have even been drafted. He would have been a teenager. Toronto, this I thought was interesting. Large turnover. Very large turnover. Punch Imlach trying to get younger, faster, and improve the defense. So I have talked a lot about Ballard and Imlach and how they were running Toronto into the ground. It is not portrayed this way in the annual I got this information from. It is portrayed that Punch Imlach gets rid of Lanny McDonald and some of these other players because he believes they will not be Maple Leafs long term. He wants guys who are going to be Maple Leafs long term. And they bring in a lot of young kids and a lot of prospects. And, it has mixed results. You bring in Rick Vive and build your Lego, pretty good. Rocky Saganuk had a decent run for a while there as well. But what we remember is this is going to be a mediocre run, and Punchlim Imlach trying to get younger, faster, and improve the defense. The problem Toronto has with that is that there's some personal animosity with some players that are going out the door. So where you want to see a general manager make decisions that are best for the team, in some cases it's for the best of the team, but it's also to get rid of players that you think are a problem. And very soon it'll be Daryl Sittler that's on his way out the door again. And again, it's in an effort to get younger and faster. So there you go. 1979-80 season. Just some trivia stuff just for those who enjoy the history videos. And I will look over the other seasons as well. This is going to be a running series during the summer. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just tapping upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon.